Welcome everybody to this week's Dissecting Design here on Game Wisdom. With the announcements of the upcoming Sonic game and of course the strange reappearance of Bubsy, I figure we're going to take a look back at one of the more classic platformers out there, and in a strange bit of fate I'm going to be playing a Sega game on the computer with an Xbox controller. If the title has included you in, we're going to be taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog. And not just one Sonic, we're going to be taking a look at a few of them. And look at how our everyone's semi-favorite blue hedgehog evolved over the 90s. And kind of the impact of the series, especially during the late 80s, early 90s. But let's get into it with the very first game. And of course, one of the more famous introductions. Alright, so, in my opinion, the original Sonic is one of the more important video games to be released for the history of the game industry. Maybe in some sense, more important than Mario. And the reason has to be, or the reason is, you have to understand what the state of the game industry was like during the late 80s, early 90s. With Nintendo in control, they basically had a complete monopoly over what games could be released and what they were willing to have in terms of content. And while Sega did come out earlier with the Sega Master System, it just did not make any real market dent compared to Nintendo and Mario. So being able to compete at least somewhat directly with Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and the Sega Genesis opened up the market for the video game industry and proved to developers and publishers that Nintendo wasn't the only game in town. Now with the original Sonic, especially when you compare it to Mario, there are a lot of similarities. Both are built on a two-command interface. You have movement and jump. Sonic obviously is a lot more momentum based than Mario. And this would prove to be one of the more challenging aspects of the game to define in later games. Now right off the bat, especially when you compare this to the original Mario, it does look a lot better. This is the 16-bit versus the, I want to say 8-bit, I'm pretty sure that is right for Nintendo. Now, another major difference between the two, of course, is the speed. Sonic was always positioned for marketing and design to be the faster version. Again, the secret. There we go. The music is also very interesting to compare. I think Mario features more, I guess, memorable sounds in the sense of knowing what it represents, from water levels to just the general themes of the level design. While Sonic, I think, has more memorable songs themselves. Like, I still hum stuff like the opening theme, the casino level, and more. But in terms of like what they actually represent, though, that is kind of hard. Like, I know the songs, I just don't remember like what levels they're from. Now, of course, this is the infamous Chaos Emerald level, which is another unique thing from Sonic. That you can beat the game, but to get the best ending, you have to collect all 7 emeralds. And you only have this span of the zones to do that in. Come on, there we go. Now the level design of Sonic is very interesting. Again, because it's based on speed, you can't really do too many intricate levels in the same sense that Mario did in the later sections of the first Mario, and of course the later Mario games. Now Sonic is also, I would say, it's kind of interesting in terms of what game is harder. And for those of you watching this, I'm curious, what do you find harder? The original Mario or the original Sonic? I think Sonic in the later levels does get a little bit on the harder side, especially with the bosses. But as we'll talk about in a later section of this video, Mario would quickly, I guess, close the gap in terms of level design and complexity. I think I must have replayed these Sonic games at least like once or twice. Oh no, must get secret. There we go. At least every few years. And maybe at some point Nintendo will ever let the Mario games on other platforms, we'll be able to do a dissecting of Mario. Oh, can we actually do it? This is one of those things that's very hard to talk about and play at the same time. Oh no. Can we make it? Now, each Sonic game had its own bonus like this. Come on. And that's another thing I'm curious about for those of you watching. Which one did you like the most? The 3D ones were very interesting, but they were also very much of a pain to play through. Can we get it? And of course, we won't be doing all 7 Chaos Emeralds in this one dissecting, because for each game, that's easily a few hours of play. Oh no, no, let's get in there. This is where that momentum pace can also really come back to bite you. But we'll play through to just the first boss, because I do want to talk about Robotnik and such for this video, and then we'll move on to the next Sonic game. Can I make it? I think we got it. There we go. Later games will also introduce the concept of Super Sonic, which is basically Mega Invulnerability if you can get all 7 Emeralds. Now, each zone of Sonic, to its credit, does feature unique designs and situations. Everyone probably has nightmares of the underwater levels that would occur in later parts of Sonic, as well as in later entries in the franchise. As with Mario, score doesn't really do anything because we don't have a high score list here. Now, whilst Mario lets you have extra hits depending upon the mushrooms, Sonic is all about those rings. And it does present an interesting risk versus reward, because you must have at least 50 rings to unlock the special levels. Oh, my mouth is tied on me. But if you get hit, you're going to lose them all. And again, and this kind of creates a contradiction in terms of the design, because you won't get all the rings, but at the same time you can't move fast, which is kind of counterproductive to Sonic's namesake. And unfortunately, a double shield doesn't do anything. The levels of Sonic are also designed very wide compared to Mario. Where Mario was more about very constricted but focused levels, these are more about having multiple avenues, but you'll rarely see them all. I'm sure for most people who play this, unless you really dedicate yourself to exploring, you would probably never see more than like a quarter or even a half of what these levels were all about. Oh no! There we go. Now we'll be coming to another unique factor of the Sonic series, and that is the boss levels. As soon as I don't get hit, I'm trying to play this perfectly while still talk about it. I'm going to be off by 1, aren't I? Yeah. Oh. I won't forget the checkpoint. Now, the boss battles of Sonic are always an interesting part that is probably one of the few areas where Sonic is better than Mario. The Bowser sections were unique. Oh, am I going to get hit? Ooh. But Sonic delivers a unique fight at the end of every zone, with our friend here, Robotnik, who would eventually become Eggman. Trying to again play this very cautiously. There we go, got him. Goodbye, Eggman. And boom. But the different bosses provide a unique treat and some variety for each end of the zone, or act. No, I'm right, zone. And with Robotnik being tied in some sense to the theme, whether being in lava or in the water, also helped. Again, you can see the difference in terms of quality of design or quality of graphics comparing this to the original Mario. But as we'll talk about later, that would not be the case forever. Now this level really is just a jump in terms of difficulty for Sonic. Now another thing I want you to pay in mind here with the first Sonic, which we'll talk about in the next minute, is that I am completely guided by momentum. You can't just immediately go from stop to run. You need to start building that up, and that leads to the more challenging aspects of Sonic, because once you start going, it can be very hard to stop. And when you have death traps like this, lava, spikes, and more, it can be very punishing for players. Especially a little death trap like that. But enough of Sonic pushing this rock. We're going to move on to Sonic 2 and see where things start to change. See you all in a second. Trying to get that Sega in each part of this video. But here comes Sonic 2. One year later. And don't want to show that off. That's the co-op. But Sonic 2 is a jump from the original Sonic, featuring better graphics, and of course, more music, and our friend here, Tails. Now, one edge that Sonic 2 has over Mario, of course, is the co-op. This can either be played split screen with one player controlling Sonic and one controlling Tails, or in a pseudo co-op where one player will always control Tails, but the star of the game will always be Sonic. Now then, let's see what we got here. Now, while Sonic is still momentum based, one of the more important moves that were added in terms of the critics of the first game is the spin dash. Ugh. Now that's actually a good example of one of the design problems that Sonic has always had, by the fact that it forces you to go forward and basically make blind actions. But this spin allows you to basically gain your full momentum at any given moment. Now, one of the changes in terms of structure compared to the original Sonic is how the Chaos Emeralds work. Going forward, instead of having you get the end of each act, it's dependent on having 50 rings and hitting a goalpost, or a checkpoint marker. Jeez. Here's a little bit more of that momentum getting into trouble. There we go. What this meant was to provide more of a risk and reward for playing Sonic and keeping 50 rings, but it gave you more opportunities to get the emeralds. Now, this bonus game is actually quite flawed, because it basically relies on you having Tails in order to collect the rings, but if you're playing the single player, Tails will not dodge any of the obstacles. So you're left in a situation when you need Tails in order to get those rings, but he's just a... he's basically a detriment, because if he gets hit, he's going to lose those rings. Now, this kind of minigame is very much built on a positive feedback loop of you need to keep getting the rings. Now, there is a situation where you can't get them by yourself, because getting extra rings will carry over to the next section. And in the later or the last area, or the last Chaos Emerald, you basically need to be always above par in order to have any chance of getting the rings, or getting the Chaos Emerald. It also relies on memorizing where the rings are going to show up in order to maximize. Like right there. This should be just about over. There we go. Got the emerald. Well, for those of you who watch my playthrough of all the classic Sonic games, you remember just how much of a nightmare it was getting the 6th and 7th emeralds. But back to it. And of course, you start back at 0 once you complete it, so you need to collect another 50 in order to get the emerald, or get the next emerald attempt. I am not a fan of this, because again of how much it really makes Tails a detriment. Now, just like the first Sonic, The levels are, of course, built on multiple paths. Now, as you can see, if I had 50 rings, we could have done it there. Oh, jeez. Alley-oop. And if I have 50 at the flag post at the end, it will not trigger the special stage. Oh. Now that is kind of a weird thing, and to this day I'm still confused as to the design decision. Why have a part where you're running to just push the player back and get hurt? Other than making it a trap, it just seems like bad design. And this would be a criticism that would carry over in Sonic in the years to come. Again, we'll play through, I'm not going to get the bonus stage again, but we'll play through just to the boss. Oh. Well, Tails just got killed, but don't worry, he'll be back. The competitive mode is a nice touch, but again, considering this is before the age of the internet, it was kind of hard to find people to come over and play this with you. Again, the music is really great, very memorable. But going forward, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 would make the zones only 2 acts long rather than 3. Again, there's our friend Eggman. This is where if you had a friend playing as Tails, you could really exploit it. Just have Sonic hang back and let Tails do all the work. Now that drill should shoot off. There it is. And goodbye. Another level cleared. And Sonic, of course, waiting around. And this is back in the days when extra lives were very important, as without them you will have to start all the way at the start. Here's another memorable level and music. And this one was featured in the new Sonic that I think is due out in August. But again, you can see how momentum and speed became the mainstay of the Sonic series. Being able to be, again, different from Mario. But, with that said, we're going to move on to Sonic 3. And basically, this would be the biggest attempt by Sonic and Sonic Team. So, I'll see you all in a second. Alright, now we come to the big one. Sonic 3, or in this case, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. What happened was, in terms of the promotion, Sonic 3 was split into 2 games. You had the Sonic 3 cartridge, and then the Sonic the Hedgehog cartridge there. They're essentially 2 parts, and you would put them together or lock them in to create Sonic 3 and Knuckles. This would give you a much larger game, and basically, this would be specifically Sonic Team's attempt at taking on Super Mario World. Because as you know, Super Mario World came out in 1990, I believe, off the top of my head. I believe 1991. And I'm going to get out of the game for a second so we can talk about this. And Super Mario World was just a major jump. One of the best games of all time, obviously. And this would be one of the biggest problems that Sonic had. It was 1990. So, while Mario and Nintendo made great strides in terms of elevating the design, Sonic always kept with that same basic theme. You had no real sense of persistence, and it was just more about playing through one single run of the game. Now, Sonic 3 and Knuckles attempted to change that. This would be the only of the classic games to offer saves. It was also the largest of the Sonic games, featuring 14 zones. How it worked was the first 6 zones were unique to the Sonic 3 cartridge, and if you just played that, that would be it. If you got the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge, it features zones 7 through 13. When you lock the cartridges together, you get all 13 zones, and if you collect all, this time there are 14 emeralds, you get the special zone at the end, playing as the super version of your character. You could also play the game as Sonic and Tails, just Sonic, just Tails, and Knuckles. As an interesting aside, you can hook the Sonic 3 cartridge into Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and play it with just Knuckles, which is a very interesting touch. But, once again, we're going to load things up, and this time we're going to play as Knuckles. Knuckles has a glide and is able to slam through certain walls. He can also climb, and of course having his little dash there. Now as you can see, Knuckles does offer a lot more different sections compared to Sonic. And there are several levels in this game that feature unique areas custom to Knuckles. Now one of the biggest changes that Sonic 3 had is that instead of having just one set of bonus stages, you have several. You have these sections which just provide rings and bonuses, and then you have hidden Mega Rings in each level. I'm just going to exit out if I can. That take you to the Emerald Challenges. This made it more rewarding to explore, but it also made it a lot harder to collect all the emeralds, because it then became more about remembering where they're at rather than being rewarded. And I'm not sure even if I remember them all myself. I like how his title down there is KTE. This would also introduce the concept of having mid-bosses. So each zone had the same 2 acts, but each act would have a boss fight. A mini-boss in the first zone, or the first act. Oh no. Oh wait, I'm good. And then the actual robotic fight in the second. So there's our first Mega Ring. And Sonic would be the first to embrace 3D. Now to complete this, you have to clear all the blue spheres. Now there's a major flaw, or maybe more of a minor flaw, in the updates to Sonic compared to the classic, with kind of an input delay I notice. It's not as responsive compared to the classic game, which can make it very hard when you're in sections like this. But as before, this will become more and more challenging as you go for the later rings. Or, I'm sorry, the layer emeralds. You could also put in... Oh no, there's that delay getting me. You can also put in other cartridges and play more of this bonus stage just separate, which I actually did a little bit. Can we do it? Let's see. Oh, I think we're good. Of course, the longer you take, the faster it gets. I like the concept of this, and if it wasn't for the controller delay, I think this would be my favorite of the bonus stages. But as I said a few minutes ago, in order to get the best ending, you not only have to get 7 emeralds, but then there's 7 super emeralds that are part of the Knuckles side, or the Sonic and Knuckles part of the content. This game would also introduce more shields to the game. Like so. This shield collects rings. Fire shield makes you immune to fire. Water means you don't have to worry about breathing underwater. But like, this would be a section that is unique to Knuckles. Normally when we get here, Sonic and Tails have to take the spring up. Knuckles just plows right through. And this gives us a different section. Oh no! Again, he's still momentum base. There we go, gotcha. Nice. And this will also infer on having a different Act 2. So if you really want to see everything there is in Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I'm sorry, you basically have to play through it at minimum 2 times. So again, this part is 100% unique to Knuckles. And there are several zones later that also do this. Oh, almost got hit there. As I said at the start, this is probably the most feature-rich Sonic game until we get to the 3D games, which unfortunately we won't be covering, because they would certainly make up their own Dissecting Design. Again, we'll go through the first act completely. Again, another bonus. Ah yes, this one. And this was basically Sonic Team's attempt at differentiating themselves from Mario and trying to add some semblance of more value or more content. Because again, at this point, we have already seen Super Mario World, and even just more platformers like the Donkey Kong Country series, and so many more on the SNES, and even on the Genesis. And just so we're not doing this for the next 20 minutes, let's just end it. If you're good at this, you can play this for like 5-10 minutes. But I won't bore you with that. Extra life. Gotta be careful with those guys. And oh, there's another little secret there. Again, notice how the level design is built around these multiple paths. And again, a player is never going to be doing it all. It's just not possible to do how it basically is built on these kinds of locked sections. We should be coming to the end any second. But you are committed to these paths. Oh, jeez. We should be at the boss. And there's our friend Robotnik. Ow! No! Now, another thing to take note is that you're actually fighting robotic clones of Robotnik as Knuckles. While with Sonic, you're always fighting him. Come on. Alright, let's take him out for real this time. Come on. Oof. You can also use his... Oh, jeez. His glang, or his hang glide to apparently get yourself killed. Alright. Third time has to be the charm, right? Again, the boss battles are another unique mainstay of the Sonic series. But let's try this for real. I hope. Can't believe I got knocked backwards there. Oh, jeez. Again, as long as I'm carrying the one ring, I'm good. Come on. Should be dead after one more pattern. There we go. Much better. And we hit that. And with that said, we're going to move on to one more game to talk about the problems that Sonic the Hedgehog had. And despite being a unique part of the game industry, Sonic just never managed to get ahead of Mario once we got past the first game. But we'll talk about that next. Sonic, as time went on, and as we have certainly seen, definitely degraded in quality. And this is Sonic 3D Blast. Again, Sega was the first to try to adopt 3D for its games, and unfortunately it didn't have good results. 1996, so this was going to be beyond. Sega was still keeping with the Sega Genesis, even after we had stuff like the Nintendo 64 and even the PlayStation. And this was actually not done by Sonic Team, but by Traveler's Tales. But this is a great way to talk about the problems of Sonic. The Sonic level design never, or even just the game design in general, never evolved beyond its initial allure. As we saw with Mario, especially with the growth from Super Mario to Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World, you saw the greater complexities and varieties of the games. Again, this is why Super Mario World is still considered one of the best games ever made. Sonic just never managed to evolve and iterate on that design. And with a game like this, it really is a little bit painful to play, especially going back to it. But this is, again, another example of why Sonic's speed became more and more annoying. Because of the fact that you're supposed to move fast, it makes it impossible to react to any dangers that are in your way. And most often than not, you're going to smack into enemies that you could never see coming. And the 3D of this game is pretty bad. It makes it very hard to gauge depth and position of some of these enemies. Oh, jeez. And being momentum based also hurts. Oh, God. This also went back to needing rings in order to activate the secret levels, which when you're combined with this 3D is just a nightmare. Now when... oh, jeez. Again, come on. Making this one very frustrating to play. Now with the later 3D Sonic games, basically Sonic's speed could not be translated well to 3D. And they had to slow things down, create almost a pseudo 3D. In the sense that the levels are in 3D, but you're still really moving along a two-dimensional plane. There we go, we got all the little birds. And they just never managed to get the formula right. Oh, and by the way, even though I hit the birds, you need to collect them all, or it doesn't count. There we go, there's 3. So now I have to play a little game of Find the Flicky. Where are you, buddy? That's a mine. But the problem, though, again, is that... oh, there you are. While Nintendo continued to evolve and iterate, Sega just never managed to do it. And I don't know if this was a decision by Sonic Team or a mandate by Sega themselves. That, as you saw over the last few plays of Sonic 1 through 3, if I didn't tell you what games they were from, or even without you knowing it, would you have been able to tell that they were completely different games? With Nintendo and Mario, it's very easy to see that jump in quality and level design between them. And Sonic and Sega would continue to try and take Sonic in different directions, for better and for worse. There's, of course, Sonic Spinball, which is basically Sonic with pinball. There is Sonic CD, Knuckles Chaotix, and then, of course, the 3D games. But none of them managed to capture the simplicity of the original Sonic games, but then they never managed to grow beyond it. And again, we could certainly dedicate a good 20-30 minutes talking about the later 3D games. Now here's Tails, who, once you give him enough rings, you get the bonus level. And this kind of graphics reminds me of Vector Man. Another attempt at Sega to try and create another mascot character. But again, you can see just how annoying it is to get the depth of field right. Come on. But we'll take it back to the title screen to wrap it up after this. Oh, can we do it? I've only played through this, I think, once, and this was on the original Sega Genesis. Alright. Now that, and again, we have to do it multiple times. And notice the fact that you do need to be over each section in terms of range, or you'll just never be able to get the emerald. There you go. And Sonic goes. Look at that 3D, folks. But let's head back to the Genesis collection. I'll give my final thoughts. So to wrap up our video for this week, Sonic has certainly had an interesting lifespan. And in the classic era, at least with our 4 games here, in terms of major plays, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Knuckles, and there's Sonic CD, which is not part of this collection. The Sonic game design just never really managed to evolve. And again, it doesn't seem like Sonic Team was interested in iterating as much compared to Nintendo and the evolution from Mario to Mario World, and then of course Super Mario 64. And Sega just tried to do more with other mascot characters, be it stuff like Vector Man down here, Toe Jam and Earl, and even having a franchise or fan favorite treasure work on games like Dynamite Heady, and I know there's a few other ones as well. But Sonic did manage to do what was meant to, and that was provide an adequate competition to Nintendo during Nintendo's basically utter dominance of the market. But as we can see, while Sonic did come out ahead at the start, Nintendo just quickly overtook them in terms of design, polish, and iteration. The fact that they were still doing a basic Sonic game in 1996 is kind of telling, especially considering the jump that Nintendo made with Super Mario World 1990, and the fact that Sonic just never went ahead. And I think part of that, again, is how they were locked into this design due to Sonic's mainstay, or the speed. As you saw over these last 4 games, Sonic is designed to be played fast in order to keep your momentum up, but you can't do that due to how the levels were designed. Because the camera was so tightly focused, it meant that any time you ran for more than like half a second, you could easily go off a ledge into a pit, get hit by an enemy, lose your rings, and all other manner of things. And having those weird spring traps designed to force you back never really worked for me, I think. It just felt, again, like counterintuitive to the design of Sonic. Now, the later games, I think, including the Sonic Anniversary game, Sonic Generations, there we go, managed to get around this by panning the camera out to the point that it became a lot easier to track Sonic compared to the environment around him, which is unfortunately something that the 3D Sonic games also ran into trouble with. But if you're looking for a more modern game of Sonic that actually worked, definitely take a look at Sonic Generations. And it'll be curious to see how the next Sonic game, which I guess is going to be a remake, will do. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching this week's Dissecting Design. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. If you have a suggestion for a future game to look at, let me know in the comments below. And check back daily for more discussions on design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. We'll be having another Dissecting Design next week, but until then, have a great day. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and when we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.